Welcome to This Week in Legal Blogging for February 4th, 2021. This is the program in which we talk with leading lawyers from across the industry about blogging and about their practices. This is Bob Ambrogi. I have my own blog called Law Sites and also have the podcast called Law Next. And this program is presented and produced by LexBlog, providing lawyers with turnkey digital publishing solutions and strategic consulting for 16 years. Find out more about LexBlog at lexblog.com/products and find all the back episodes of this show on YouTube at youtube.com/LexBlog or on Apple Podcasts. And very happy to welcome to the show today, Angela Reddock-Wright, who is an attorney in Los Angeles, where she specializes in employment, workplace, and Title IX law, and also serves as a mediator, arbitrator, and workplace and Title IX sexual assault investigator. Angela, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here and great to meet you. I just gave the short description of your practice, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about what your practice is and what you do?
So I've been practicing law for about 25 years, primarily working in the area of employment and labor law. And I was a litigator for about 25 years. In the last 10 years, I focus exclusively on doing what we call neutral work. So on any given day, I'm working as a mediator, an arbitrator, or a workplace investigator, either, helping to solve issues dealing with employment law. So as a mediator, I'm a neutral facilitator that helps parties resolve their issues informally. As an arbitrator, I'm sitting as a mini judge, so to speak, conducting hearings and ultimately making a decision in an arbitration case. And then as an investigator, I'm called as a third-party neutral to either investigate workplace claims or what we call Title IX claims, which you normally see in a university or a school environment. So that's what I do.
Right. So after litigating all those years, and I assume you represented employers as a litigator, is that what
I represented both sides.
Did you? Yeah. So what caused you to want to transition to being a neutral?
Well, I knew early on, even as a litigator, and I loved litigation, and I think I was a good and a strong litigator, but I knew early on that my personality leaned towards being someone that likes to focus on making peace, being a peacemaker, focus on resolution. Even in the cases that I litigated, one of the first questions I would always ask of the client or to opposing counsel is, how can we focus on getting this case resolved as soon as possible or as soon as makes sense? And so as I met mediators over the years as a litigator, I said to myself, one day I'm going to make that transition because I think I have the personality, the patience, the listening skills, everything that it takes to be a great mediator. So I knew eventually I would make that transition, and I love it, haven't looked back, and I'm glad that I'm able to bring my skill set and knowledge and experience as an employment lawyer to the work that I do as a neutral.
So, Angela, I'm wondering, given the past year that we've just been through and that we're frankly still in the middle of for most of us, how has that impacted your practice as a mediator and arbitrator?
Well, I've been busy. There was a little concern when you say this past year. So much has happened this past year, but let's say,
I know. Let's start with the pandemic.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So the first concern when the pandemic hit is whether we would all be working, not just mediators and arbitrators and investigators, but I'm sure lots of professionals were concerned about how this would impact their work. So fortunately, whether there's a pandemic, not a pandemic, there are always, because we're human, there are always issues in the workplace. So the issues they were similar to what we always see, issues of discrimination, harassment, but they started to change. We started to see claims that were arising out of people working from home and being remote or seeking leaves of absence and sick pay and so forth related to the pandemic. So I'm fortunate to say that despite the pandemic and the awful impact that it's had on our country, that there's still been a need for lawyers and for mediators and arbitrators and investigators to resolve issues that have arisen as a result of the pandemic. And then, of course, and I'll pause, but the other big thing that happened, one of the big things that happened last year is following the death of George Floyd, it kind of gave breath to the Black Lives Matter movement and related movements. And so my year has also been busy kind of mediating, arbitrating, investigating claims arising out of that movement, meaning people who now in their workplaces, are basically saying, hey, me too, I've suffered discrimination, whether it be in hiring or promotion or disciplinary actions. And I now want to bring attention to that issue. So I've spent a good part of my year also kind of dealing with the fallout of, or the kind of increased focus around the world, honestly, on issues of race and gender and ethnicity and national origin. So it's been a busy year, and I'm glad that I've been able to be at the cross section and the intersection of some really important issues.
Yeah, it sounds like you are right there at the heart of it, and I'm just curious how it happens, sort of technically. I mean, given that we're not having arbitration hearings or mediation proceedings in the way that we used to do them. Are you conducting proceedings online?
Everything's online. I literally have barely left my home office in the pandemic started in March, so almost a year, for 11 months. I go out for, essential items at the grocery store. My mom lives near me. I go to, check on her, other family members, but my work has been 100% virtual.
Yeah. So how do you find that as an arbitrator or as a mediator? How do you find the way that you interact with the parties, with attorneys, to the extent they're represented by attorneys in these matters? How have you found that to work?
Yeah, well, it's different for sure, but I have found it to be effective. You have to get over I think most people have gotten over the initial shock of everything happening online.
Right.
And, as a mediator and arbitrator, even as an investigator, key to the work I do is being able to establish trust with, mostly getting the parties or the clients that I'm working with to trust me, and for me to be able to assess credibility as I'm talking to people. So that's a little difficult and challenging to do through a screen, but it's not impossible. And what I do is the personality you're seeing now is kind of the personality that it's who I am, and it's what I exhibit. And I think that's why people call me kind of a warm, engaging personality, I think is what I'm known for. And so I try to use that even across the screen. So I'll spend time first just chit-chatting with people. How's your day? What's going on? And usually people have something interesting in their background, whether it's a book or a dog or a child or, anything. And so you just use that as an opportunity to get to know people better and to break the ice. And so what's different about being virtual versus in person is you have to find another way to connect with people and to establish that trust and to be able to read credibility when I'm serving as an arbitrator or an investigator. So it's, given the options, say 5 years ago or 10 years ago when we didn't have these options, we all probably wouldn't have been working right now. Our entire legal system would just be shut down. Mm-hmm. So given, the pandemic and the limited options that we have, I'm particularly grateful that we were prepared to engage in a virtual way.
Yeah. We like to talk about blogs here on this show. And so I wanted to ask you, you have a blog on your website. At what point did you decide to make that part of your website and part of what you do?
Right. So I have two websites. One is my law firm website, reddocklaw.com, and have always blogged. The challenge with blogging is you have to come up with a way to be consistent with it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look back at some old websites that I have, you find that the blogging was not very consistent, because to blog and to blog well, it takes time and to come
Mhm.
up with new and fresh ideas, etc. So I would say about 3 years ago, I really committed to blogging and making it a priority. One, because it gives me a way to share my thoughts on any given issue related to employment law or other areas that I work in. And it also helps with increasing traffic on your website. It gives me a way to engage on social media. I think the the thought today is that what's important about being on social media is that you're giving people information that they can use, that is not just about self-promotion. So blogging gives you a way to get your thoughts out, to get your expertise out, and to share that with people that follow and are interested in what you say. And of course, it helps with search engine optimization and all of those things that make for an effective digital platform. My second website is Angela Reddock-Wright.com. And that is essentially what I call a media site. I do a lot of legal commentating and on different employment issues, HR, workplace issues, and trends. And so that gives me a place to blog also, but to kind of blog on issues of kind of more a bigger interest than things that my clients may be interested
Mhm.
in, and to blog about issues that the media may be interested in and wanting to hear someone talk about. And so it gives us an opportunity to send that out to different media sources and say, hey, this is what Angela's talking about this week. Are you interested in having her come on to talk about it? The blogs on my website might be a little more esoteric or very specific to my
Right.
industry or the work I
Right.
do. It may not translate to a larger audience. So having that separate media site gives me an opportunity to blog about bigger issues, still all focused on employment law, but kind of what I call what might be of more consumer interest.
Right. Like me too, like you were talking about before, or
Right, exactly.
yeah. And is there cross pollination there in the sense does the blog help media sources or even clients discover you and engage with you?
It does. Again, because we're regularly blogging on that site, and I blog weekly, it definitely helps keep the optimization up. But more so, it gives myself and my team that helps me with my media placements the opportunity to send something out regularly to our media contacts to say, hey, this is what Angela's talking about this week. And what it does is it forces me to really sit down, think about the topic, come up with the types of points that I think are important about that topic, as opposed to generally saying, hey, yeah, I kind of know something about this case or this issue, but this says, yes, she knows something about it and she's taken the time to write about it and to develop points and tips around it.
Yeah, I know you said earlier that one thing you know about blogging is that consistency is important.
Yes.
Any other tips? I mean, what else? What else have you learned about what makes a blog work or what makes a blog successful?
Well, I think keeping it concise and succinct and to the point. And if you focus on that as someone who writes them, it doesn't become as so overwhelming. Because if you think every blog has to be a treatise or a brief or something at that level, then it will seem overwhelming. But if you think about it as a quick 250 word, 350 word, maybe 500 on a really in-depth topic, then it's not so overwhelming. And basically, I'm an avid follower of the news. I have the news on all day, even on the days where it's somewhat depressing.
Which is
The
like
first
every day these days.
Right. One of the first things I do when I get up is, after my personal and meditative time is, comb the newspapers. I read the LA Times, the New York Times, Washington Post, all, I scan them to see what topics specifically relate to employment law and relate to my industry. And those often get those articles often give me my inspiration around what my next blog will be. And so I'll send myself a note or an email saying, hey, this was like today in California, we have Proposition 22, which deals with the on-demand Uber, Lyft industry and the independent contractor status of the of the workers that work in that industry. So I wrote myself a note like, hey, look more. There was a new California Supreme Court case around that. So I wrote myself a note like, hey, you may want to do some follow-up on this, or read more on this, and that might be my blog topic next week. So it's always top of mind for me what I'm going to write about next, and I try to stay really top. When it comes to the media work that I do, I try to stay really topical and to write about things that I think the media would be interested in. On the Reddock Law side, those tend to be a little more specific to my day-to-day work in practice. So I probably only do those blogs once a month or once every other month or so, because they're a little more detailed. And I want them to be helpful to my clients and the people that I service. So I try to make them a little more in-depth.
I know I have to let you go, but I'm just curious. You've obviously been very successful in your career and also successful in getting the attention of the media, doing media appearances and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering, do you have any? What's your advice for a young lawyer who's looking to make a name for him or herself? What's a good way to do that? What's your sort of nutshell version of how to do that?
Well, first, I think you have to be good at what you do, right? So a young lawyer, especially, I would say, focus on being a great lawyer and the rest will come. Not everybody's interested in media, but for those who are, there's so much information out there about, doing your own press and, sending out your own press digests and media alerts and so forth. That's certainly one way. Or looking for folks that there are lots of folks out there that specialize in doing PR for lawyers in particular and legal professionals. So I would do research around who those folks are in my region and see what it takes to become a part of their roster. But I think that even they, you're paying them to help you build your brand, but even they want to work with people who are experienced and established. So it still goes back to, the first key is to do great work, to get good results, and that'll make you attractive to anybody, to new clients, to the media, to others, podcasters, who want to have you on their show. So what independent of, the media, I always say to young lawyers, just, your first 7 years should be entirely focused on getting great training and becoming a great lawyer. And then the rest works itself out.
It all follows from there.
Yes.
Well, Angela Reddock-Wright, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today and tell us about your career and your blog. It's been very interesting and a real honor to meet you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Keep up the great work that you guys do.
Thanks so much. That does it for today's episode of This Week in Legal Blogging. We are here every Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. Watch for us again next week. Until then, this is Bob Ambrogi on behalf of everybody at LexBlog. Thanks for listening.